at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. If the NFL season started today, Mason Rudolph would be the Steelers' QB1. He has the most experience of any QB on the roster, started 13 games as a Steeler. 8 of those were wins. The team drafted Will Howard in the 6th round this year in the draft. They have Skylar Thompson as QB3. Of course, we are still waiting on Aaron Rodgers news. Here's what Mason Rudolph had to say about that.
Every team's adding quarterbacks every year. It's just a normal motor operation. Whoever they bring in, obviously who it is will determine. I learned a long time ago who it is, and then the financial compensation will really tell you what's going to go down as far as the depth chart. So I get that, and I'm all I really can do is cliche and annoying as it sounds, is just keep having a great spring and enjoying working with the receivers, learning the offense, making the most of every rep I can get, and that's what I did in 2023. That's what I've done my whole career, and you get opportunities, and then you just got to be ready to capitalize when they come.
Louis Riddick, Rudolph saying all the right things. We know Mike Tomlin's track record and just persistently not having a losing record, but how far can these Steelers go if week 1 QB1 is Mason Rudolph?
Look, they're not going to be contenders for their division crown, and that's just a fact as far as I'm concerned. Like, you're going to be in a division, man, that has Joe Burrow in it with all of his weapons back, and we'll see how the defense goes for Cincinnati. And then you're going to be in a division with Lamar Jackson, who arguably is quarterbacking the best roster in the NFL. And Cleveland is not a team you can sleep on. It just isn't. I would take Cleveland's quarterback room right now, as presently comprised, 100 out of 100 times over Pittsburgh's quarterback room as presently comprised. I would. So that leaves me to believe that, look, if Aaron Rodgers does not report to them at some point in time here between the start of their OTAs and their mandatory minicamp, and that if he is not in there in that building on the football field, in the practice field, in the meeting rooms with those quarterbacks, that offensive line, those running backs, the wide receivers, and he's just going to show up in training camp at some point in time, they are way behind, man. They are way behind. They are ice skating uphill in a division where everyone else, outside of Cleveland, obviously a quarterback, is kind of set and ready to roll. In a conference overall that has nothing but standout quarterback play when you're talking about the AFC. And the last time I checked, the Steelers don't measure themselves, historically by just being competitive. They're trying to win the North, and they're trying to win the conference, and they're trying to win Super Bowls. That's how they judge success in Pittsburgh. Not being competitive, not being respectable, not, hey, can you win 8.5 games? Can you win 9.5 games? Can we just keep Mike Tomlin's streak of being a plus 500 football coach, alive? That's not how they judge success. And if they don't get Aaron Rodgers in there, it's going to be one of those years where every single game they're going to be holding on for dear life.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Lou. And if you don't get Aaron Rodgers in there, guys, think about this. Lives are going to change. I mean, if you just think about the mentality of Cam Hayward and Minkah Fitzpatrick, if I'm going to the first game of the season and I look out there and Mason Rudolph or Will Howard is my quarterback, why the hell am I out here wasting my time? If you're Cam Hayward going into year whatever it is, why are you out here giving everything you have for Will Howard or Mason Rudolph? No disrespect to either one of them, but we're not going anywhere with them at the quarterback position. So why am I out here in my umpteenth year in this league trying to win a championship when offensively and organizationally we're not? And so they have to know something about Aaron Rodgers. Otherwise, they are taking years off the life of guys who are potential Hall of Fame players. When you talk about Cam Hayward and TJ Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick, if you go out there with Mason Rudolph game 1, if I were Cam Hayward, I might not even show up game 1, because if you're not going to put forth the effort offensively or organizationally, why do you want me out here? Like, that's the level that the Pittsburgh Steelers have taken this to by the way they've handled this quarterback situation. And it's no disrespect to those guys. Will Howard may be a good quarterback someday down the road, but he ain't winning nothing right now for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's why they need Aaron Rodgers, and they better know something that we don't, Graz.
So, yeah, Graz, I mean, everybody's looking at you. Any update on when we might get a decision from Rodgers?
I do not know. There's only one person in the world that has that information. It is Aaron Rodgers. He will share it when he feels it's important to share it. I just think, Boog, if the Steelers know something about Aaron Rodgers, it's that he wasn't that much better last year than Mason Rudolph was. I just don't feel like that's going to make a huge difference in terms of how the Steelers play this year. I think the Steelers are approaching this offseason as there weren't a lot of great options at quarterback, so we'll take what we can get and lean into our strengths.
And since Big Ben retired 2021, the Steelers have thrown the fewest touchdowns in the NFL play, last in points per game after Week 8. New head coach Ben Johnson was hired away from Detroit to help resolve that. OTAs got underway yesterday for Chicago with year 2 on the horizon for number 1 pick Caleb Williams. Coach talked about starting off on the right foot, with his QB today.
It starts with developing a rapport and a trust, and that's earned over time. You don't walk in day one and expect that to be achieved. And so the more time we spend together, he understands that I have his best interests at heart, and vice versa. He's going to go out there and play as well as he possibly can, not just for himself or me, but for the whole team and the city.
Bears reporter Courtney Cronin was there today. Courtney, you've been there for a few years and a few different head coaches. What did you see today that showed signs of change in this Ben Johnson regime?
Well, Phil, before we even get to any of the football that we saw at day 2 of OTAs, it was what Ben Johnson said at the podium, getting out in front of the story that's been the centerpiece of the Bears organization for the last week. The information that came out in Seth Wickersham's book regarding Caleb Williams and the pre-draft process. And Johnson got out in front of it and said that he talked to his quarterback last week. He felt it needed to be addressed, but that Williams is his own man, is going to be treated as such. And there were a couple of questions that came up about the feelings that Williams had about the organization previously, what happened last year. Obviously, Johnson cannot speak to that specifically, but said in the 4 months that he's worked with Williams, he has been, quote, outstanding. And after a couple more questions, he was asked the obvious one, the big elephant in the room, the feeling from Carl Williams, Caleb's father, that Chicago is where quarterbacks go to die. And this was the eye-opening moment for me today, hearing Ben Johnson responding to that, saying, quote, I love it. He wants the opportunity to change that narrative in 2025. He believes that is where, quote, great journeys will begin. Now, as Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson begin their rapport, remember, it is only day 2 of OTAs. There were a couple of mistakes on the field today, and I go back to a conversation I had with Jalen Johnson last month about this increased accountability that these players are hoping to see on the field. And I said, what does that look like in 2025? He told me point blank, if you see it, call it out. That is exactly what happened from Ben Johnson today at OTAs. There was a moment during 7-on-7 where veteran tight end Cole Kmet was not lined up properly, and Johnson had no issue letting him know. Even the veterans are not immune from getting yelled at from time to time, that he needed to be in the right place. It's only day 2 of the install, and Johnson has reiterated time and again he expects there to be mistakes on the field. Right now is when they should be making them, but there are too many pre-snap penalties, some mental lapses that Johnson felt he needed to call out right in the moment. So as they get on the field tomorrow for the final day of OTAs this week, those things can be corrected.
Day 2 of the install, year 2 with Caleb Williams, and Ben Johnson knows all too well, coming from Detroit, how challenging that division is going to be in 2025. Courtney Cronin, thanks so much. Well, the Bears addressed major needs this offseason after going 5-11, an 11th losing season in the last 12 years. They brought in Ben Johnson. The O-line allowed the league high in sacks, so they got guards Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson, as well as center Drew Dahlman. And then they got Caleb Williams, some more weapons in the draft, taking tight end Colston Loveland and wide receiver Luther Burden with their first 2 picks. Back here with Dan Graziano, Booger McFarland, and Louis Riddick. And Graz, last week, we heard these stories come out. Courtney mentioned them as well about Williams not wanting to go to Chicago before ultimately deciding that maybe he's the guy to turn this franchise around. What is a realistic ceiling for Caleb and the Bears in 2025?
I think, Phil, if they can get to around 500 and show progress as the year goes on, that would have to be considered a successful season. People want to talk about playoffs. I just feel like that's a little unrealistic given their division, the strength of the other 3 teams, all of whom made the postseason last year, and given the fact that Ben Johnson is a first-time head coach. Caleb Williams is still a young, developing quarterback. And when you listen to Ben Johnson talk and you hear Courtney Cronin talk about the things he has said since he got there, he is talking about building something. He is not talking about putting the finishing touches on something.